So Tamara Butler and Ashley Patterson, please join us because my best friend has been telling me to stop with all the social science. So please join us to have a bit of a conversation about the ways in which humanists engage in this work, our power to do this, the justice work of Black women writers.
Hello, everyone. So it's just me riding solo today. So Ashley is not here, but she sent some lovely words to share with us. So I'm very excited about it. And I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you for the opportunity because I'm very excited. This is a little bit new work and a lot of reflection. So just bear with me here. My name is Tamara Butler. I'm an assistant professor of English education and African American and African Studies at Michigan State University. And hopefully we'll enjoy this journey together. So before I start, the image that you see, the first image is actually from work that I did with, I developed the image. So the cutout you've probably seen circulating, but the hair of the woman is actually from, was designed thinking about working with various African-American girls in Columbus, Ohio, with, at the time, my doctoral colleague, Erica Womack, who is now assistant professor at Otterbein, and looking at how do we use the writings and work around Black women to engage with young Black girls. And some of the images are also, if you recognize the colorful images, Amina Robinson's work, MacArthur Foundation, a genius, and she's also deceased, but her work still lives on. So just thinking about how do we use text to work with young women. So of course, you can't start without the lovely words of Alice Walker. So she says, it is in our search of our mother's gardens, it is in the end, the saving of lives is what we writers are about. Whether we are minority writers or majority, it is simply our power to do this. We do it because we care. So with that, I'm thinking a little bit more about how Black women writers have really fueled and pushed us to think about justice, think about land, think about liberation. So the text that really changed me was Margot Perkins' Autobiography as Activism, where she looks at the work of Elaine Brown, the writing of Angela Davis, and the writing of course, my favorite, Assata Shakur. So activists use life writing to recreate themselves, as well as the era they recount. Many things are at stake. So think about control and create. So they are able to control the historical record, control their own public image, as well as control how the resistance movement may or may not have incorporated them. So, and she also continues that in this case, those narratives are directly tied to impending struggles. Activists may even be writing to save their own lives. So I'm thinking about writing in power, and I turn to the first chapter of Assata Shakur's autobiography, and at the very closing, where she's writing about being in her hospital bed. One night, one of the nurses came in and gave me 3 books. I hadn't even thought about reading. The books were a godsend. They had been carefully selected. One was a book of Black poetry, one was a book called Black Women in White America, and the third was a novel, Siddhartha, by Herman Hesse. When I read the books about Black women, I felt the spirits of those sisters feeding me, making me stronger. Black women have been struggling and helping each other to survive the blows of life since the beginning of time. And when I read Siddhartha, a peace came over me. I felt a unity with all living things. I felt the birds, the sun, and the trees. I was in communion with all the forces on the earth that truly love people, in communion with all revolutionary forces on earth. So with that, I began to think about another great poet, June Jordan, who was also the poet that my doctoral advisor loves and research, Valerie Kinlock, who is also a sister from Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I'm from. It's just a way in which the universe just kind of comes together, right? And she often read this, and it still resonates with me today. Hey, come on out wherever you are. We need to meet at this tree. We need to have a meeting at this tree. Ain't even been planted yet. So thinking about Black women, land, and justice. So how have we thought about Black women's writings and stories in relationship to research and justice? And so I turn a little bit to where are we now? So here are the words of my co-presenter, Ashley Patterson. Joy and solace. As an academic, as a Black woman academic, joy and energy and enthusiasm are what keep me engaged in the work. Solace for me is calm and quiet, the space in which I combine the strengths of others with those of my own that I have the courage to identify and to embrace. The mindfulness required to exist in these states is not haphazardly come upon. Rather, as a Black woman academic, I am constantly searching for the conditions that will make experiences a possibility. I do not find those conditions in classrooms where students ignore the fight and pain and bloodshed of my ancestors endured in order for me to have the title of doctor, and instead call me without invitation by my first name. I do not find them in the request to serve on and add diversity to this and that committee when those requests are coupled with inquiries into how I'm able to keep up with a research program with so much service on my plate. One place in particular I do feel supportive love and unspoken understanding that allow me to feel joy and solace is in the Black Women Gathering Place. Convened by myself and 2 colleagues, the Black Women's Gathering Place is comprised of a multi-generational group of Black women who come together monthly or so to talk, eat, laugh, cry, sit, and be with one another. We talk about nothing and everything, sometimes bringing in specific references from our everyday lives or popular media for group members to weigh in on. And other times we listen out loud, we listen to ourselves say out loud the things we have only thought about in our minds. In this place, with these women, I feel invigorated and reminded of the work I was put here to accomplish. I can draw from the range of strengths that they have selflessly shared with me as I prepare to live another day. I keep in a piece of this place and the women with whom I share it inside of me as I navigate the many corners of the academy in my Black woman body, and emboldened by the resulting joy and solace I feel, I continue on. So Ashley is on the top, on the black blazer, and these are some of the women that have really helped us grow as doc students. My advisor is Dr. Valerie Kinlock at the time, and she's in the green sweater at the bottom. So as I continue on, I'm thinking a little bit about my place. So this is actually from the road that I grew up on. My family still lives there. So in this place, right, I'm South Carolina. I'm all about Spanish moss and oak trees. Right, that's the place that I'm from, dirt roads and all. But it's in this place with these women that I feel the most invigorated. And so for me, I'm thinking about Black women's stories and writers. In my current project, I'm interested in the connection between Black women's storytelling and land justice. I've been thinking about Black women's relationship to land as I think about my grandmother and mother who struggle with one another to discuss taxes and deeds and heirs property of our family that our family lives on and holds claim to on Johns Island. The acres that flank the family's winding dirt roads like green and brown riverbanks. So this is a picture of me and my grandmother and my cousin, and the far right, your left. The middle is me and my aunts as a kid, and then my mom and I on the beaches of South Carolina. So I'm really thinking about where do we go from here, right? So where do we go with some of the stories and some of the ideas? So I want to know what memories are buried here in the fertile lands that once held the large pecan tree and rows of collard greens, tomatoes, watermelons, eggplants. I want to know what stories are settled under the trailers of my grandmother's nephews, our 30-year-old trailer, and under the cement bricks of my aunt, uncle, and cousins' houses. So I think a little bit about the work that has been coming out around land and Black women's stories. I've been journeying my way back to the concept of rootedness, land, and communities as sites of knowledge, learning, and engagement, which are reoccurring themes in my research. So bear with me as I sort through this kind of approach to connecting land, environmental justice, and storytelling. So for any of you who are on Twitter or Instagram, you may recognize the artwork of Pierre Jean Louis, who has been depicting Black women and nature in their hair. And I was like, this is it, right? This is the moment that I've been waiting for, and how do you draw the connections between the two? So there's all of these different images around Black women holding power and being connected to land. But it's the last 2 images where he puts women and he puts the universe of women in their hair. And so for me, it pushes me to think about this concept of Afrofuturity and think about Black land education. So when the woman spoke about planting and spoke about growing land, growing food, I almost jumped out of my seat. I was like, this is perfect timing for my presentation for so many reasons. But really thinking about Black land education, not just about the agricultural aspect, but the idea that Black women's lives have always been at the center of land, the center of land justice. So if we are thinking about English education classrooms, if we're thinking about any classrooms, the best way to get young people to understand and think about land and environment, not just agriculture, not just rural land, but also urban environments, is also to get them back to the stories where we've already started those conversations. So I'm thinking about environmental justice, Black relations to land, and community histories. The Front Porch Project, folks, we gonna talk. Because interestingly enough, I spoke with a young woman, and that's what she wanted to do, but she wanted to do it with children and front porches to get back to the history and stories around communities. So the last place the way I kind of end this is where I think about, as a college student in New Orleans at Xavier, my first professor, African-American professor, Darif Jameson, realized that I was from South Carolina. And he said, have you seen Julie Dash's Daughter of the Dust? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right? And so it was in that moment that when we actually watched it in class that I understood why people were so fascinated with talking to me, because they understood something about the Sea Islands and about Black woman identity and land that I had no idea of. And the line that I carried with me from undergrad to grad school to now is when Nana Pizant says to her daughter, I love you because you are mine. You are the fruit of an ancient tree. And this image I carried with me recently. So I teach an English education class. We started our class with storytelling and quilts. And we ended where I took 9 students, only one of those students was a student of color, to the quilt making, to our art studio, and we made a quilt around social justice issues, and this was my quilt square. And thinking about how we can think about Black women's stories being connected to land. And it was probably one of the most beautiful moments I had because I was able to talk with my students in an English class about land justice, Black women, and that's kind of where I am. So the question that I raise, which is really going to prompt us to think about what has been set up outside, is what would happen if we deeply consider the writings of Black women as entryways into life-saving possibilities. So out in the foyer, you had, there's a large poster board. And so I asked that you engage it because that's kind of where this stems from, is what books, what authors, what writings, what movies, what films have got you to thinking about land or thinking about how we can engage with young people. And really, I started with autobiographical texts, I started with poetry, but thinking about how would you build a Black girl syllabus, right? What would that look like? How would we develop that? So I encourage you to please contribute to that conversation. Thank you. No questions? Good.
I'll project. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but Tamara, that is just so amazing. One of the things I neglected to say when I was talking about our initiative is it's very place-based, and we don't have expertise in understanding what it means to be a place-based initiative. You hear a lot of people talk about neighborhoods, and you hear people talk about different, geographic locations or census blocks or whatever. But I think you've really taken it to a whole nother level. And so when you come for the people, the women with the voice on the porch, yes. Make sure you grab me, because okay. I really want to hear from you about how we can work together to bring this perspective into a place-based initiative, because I think what you're talking about is broader and bigger than that, and you just blew up my head.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Lisa Anderson from Auburn Seminary, and when you were talking, my head was blown also. The initiative that I work on uses literature to ground our understanding of healing and wholeness and wellness. And so our sacred text is Toni Morrison's Beloved. And so, and to use that as a space for which we understand the complexity of what healing and wholeness means for us, but also what does it mean to embody that space of the clearing that we talk about, that she talks about in the novel, as a place that's both inside of us, but that's connected to us through our stories. So again, when the front porch happens, I would like to be on it also. So, yeah.
Hello, I'm Tanya Robinson. I'm also from Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah. Thank you. Your presentation was amazing and really, really inspiring to me. And so I preface this with that because my memory from growing up in my trauma, my goal was to get away. I don't remember a South Carolina or Charleston in the manner that you do. So I guess my question would be, because I'd like to have girls now, and I would love to be able to help them understand that that's why I love them, because they are the fruit of an ancient tree, because I really believe that. And so how do um, I've been trying to figure out on my own ways to kind of bridge the gap, starting with kind of letting go things from the past and forgiving my mom and really rebuilding a relationship with her. But how do I even, questions in my mind have been, how do I even do that when my history or my view of it doesn't even extend that? It's there, but I can't see it. Does that make sense? So anyway, I just, for my girls and for myself as I'm, getting older, how do you approach kind of fixing that or healing that level of healing? Where's the bridge from who I am now and my empowerment to that'll take me back and help me repair that? Hope that.
Thank you. I don't have an answer, but I do have a thought. And I think the thing that I found is taking your girls to a place, or taking yourself to a place that still is a place of power. So for me, going home, I enjoy going home, but I also struggle with it because it's a place where my family to this day still argues about land. And there's, I'm living in a house full of women. So for me, it's always hard, but I think it's so necessary to keep going back and visiting places that have often been painful. Or for me, I think about pedagogy of place. So I'm thinking about, from my education, we always went to plantations, and trying to explain to my Midwestern students that plantations and my relationship to the South is much different than what they think it is. So for me, it's redefining those spaces for myself, as well as redefining those spaces for students. So I've taken students to South Carolina, and we've walked through plantations, and we've asked really hard questions about, there's trauma in this place, but nobody wants to talk about it. Right? So how do we have that conversation? And some of the students actually triggered the conversation for themselves. I didn't have to do it. So just knowing that, I think if you're upfront and honest and going into those spaces, you'll have some really good conversations, and you'll be able to heal because you're approaching it with the desire to heal and really think through the trauma. So thank you.